or maybe for 10 minutes. And then the principal said, you can't cut school to go.
Welcome to our channel. Today, we will step together into a story that is not about the spotlight or thunderous applause. This is the story of a woman who has spent her entire life making the world laugh, while her heart was silently breaking into pieces. This is the true story of Carol Burnett. For more than 50 years, millions of American viewers have grown familiar with an image that seems so very ordinary. At the end of every episode of the show that bears her name, Carol Burnett stands under the bright stage lights, flashes her signature radiant smile, and gently tugs on her left earlobe. That is all. A small gesture, a fleeting moment, and then the screen fades to black. For many viewers, it is simply the endearing habit of America's comedy queen, a charming trademark, an invisible signature that needs no ink. But behind that tiny gesture lies an ocean of emotion that no camera could ever capture. It is a secret code. It is a silent message. It is an invisible thread connecting the glittering lights of Hollywood stages to a small, dimly lit room where an elderly woman sits by an old television, hands folded together, her heart filled with pride and love. Every time Carol tugs her ear, she is sending a message that only one person in the world could understand. That person is the grandmother who saved her from the darkness of her childhood. She is saying, I am thinking of you. I am okay. I love you so very much. And when we understand that, Carol Burnett's entire life appears before our eyes in a completely different way. Deeper, more painful, and far more beautiful. To understand why Carol Burnett laughs, we must first understand how that little girl cried. Let us turn back the clock to the 1940s. Imagine the city of Hollywood, where millions of Americans dream of stage lights and glamorous red carpets. But in the poor neighborhood of that very city stands a small apartment numbered 102. There are no red carpets here, no sparkling lights, only a Murphy bed that takes up almost the entire cramped living space, and nights so dark that young Carol would only dare to crack open the closet door, hoping for a sliver of light from the hallway to slip in like a flickering candle in the thick darkness. Her father and mother, talented, beautiful people full of dreams, were slowly swallowed by alcohol. Not suddenly, not loudly, but gradually, quietly, like morning mist hiding the sun. Carol did not grow up with warm family dinners or peaceful nights of sleep. She grew up with arguments echoing through thin walls, the empty stares of parents who were no longer truly present, and the most terrifying feeling a child can experience: complete loneliness even while standing in the same room with her own family. And when you grow up in a family like that, you quickly learn a lesson no school ever teaches. You must become an adult before you even get the chance to be a child. Carol learned to play the clown to ease the tension. Carol learned to smile so no one would see her cry. Carol learned to turn pain into art, not because she wanted to, but because it was the only way to survive another day. Yet in all that darkness, there was one light that never went out. That was Nanny, Carol's grandmother. An ordinary woman with no money and no power, but she possessed something more precious than all of those things combined: her presence. She was there. She did not leave. She did not fall apart. And in Carol's unstable world, Nanny's presence was the only solid rock the little girl could stand on. The two of them would often go to the movies together, losing themselves in the worlds on the silver screen, where stories always had happy endings and families stayed whole. Those were rare moments of happiness, and it was inside those dark movie theaters that a fire began to burn in young Carol's heart. The fire of a dream that needed money to become real. And money was something apartment 102 did not have. Carol was accepted into UCLA, an extraordinary achievement for a poor girl from that shadowy neighborhood. But tuition was a wall too high to climb. Her dream was dying, not from lack of talent, but from lack of money. Then a miracle happened. During a performance at a private party, a stranger approached her. He did not introduce himself by name. He simply looked at her with the eyes of someone who had seen something very special that he knew the world had not yet discovered. He handed Carol an envelope. Inside was $1,000, a fortune in those days, enough to take her to New York and start over. But along with the money came 3 conditions. First, she must never reveal his name to anyone. Second, she must use the money to pursue her dream without hesitation and without looking back. Third, when she succeeded, she must help others the way he had helped her. Carol took the envelope with trembling hands, and for the next 50 years, she kept her promise. No one ever learned who that mysterious man was. In a Hollywood where secrets are usually traded for fame and money, Carol Burnett chose silence. Because for her, gratitude is not something to show off. Gratitude is something to live by. That envelope did not just take Carol to New York. It shaped the entire person she became, a woman who always believed that even the smallest act of kindness could change an entire life. New York at that time waited for no one, especially not for a skinny, loud girl from the poor side of Hollywood with no connections in the entertainment industry. But Carol Burnett never asked anyone to wait for her. She stepped onto the Broadway stage in the musical Once Upon a Mattress and proved to the whole city that comedy does not need perfect beauty. It needs soul. It needs truth. It needs a person brave enough to stand on stage and say, "Here I am, with everything I have and everything I do not have." Carol had all of that and more. But the real gamble, the truly daring move that even her closest friends shook their heads at, came in 1967. Carol Burnett knocked on CBS's door with an idea that the executives thought was completely crazy. She wanted her own variety show. They laughed, not polite laughter. They laughed for real, with the arrogance of people who believed they were saving this girl time by telling her the truth straight. They said variety shows were a man's game. They said American audiences were not ready to watch a woman head that kind of program. They advised her to go home and play the funny wife in some television sitcom, because that was her place. Carol Burnett listened, nodded politely, then did exactly what she wanted. The Carol Burnett Show was born. And for 11 straight seasons and 25 Emmy Awards, she did not just prove those executives wrong. She rewrote American television history in golden ink. Every Saturday night, millions of American families gathered around their televisions to watch Carol. She was the woman who could walk downstairs wearing a dress made from curtains, imitating Scarlett O'Hara so perfectly that audiences laughed until tears streamed down their faces. She was the woman who could look straight into the camera, not like a star performing, but like a friend talking to you from her own living room. That was something no male comedian of that era could do. In 1976, the National Enquirer published a story. They accused Carol Burnett of being drunk and behaving loudly and out of control at a restaurant in Washington, D.C. For most Hollywood stars, this would be a small matter. Deny it or stay silent and move on. Next week, there would be another story. People would forget, but for Carol Burnett, this was no small matter. It was the deepest insult anyone could give her, because she had seen what alcohol could do to a person. She had watched her father disappear into bottles of liquor. She had watched her mother, that beautiful and talented woman, slowly become a shadow of herself. She had grown up with the quiet fear that those same genes were flowing in her own blood, and her entire life had been a fight to make sure that story did not repeat. A lie about drinking was, for other people, just a lie. For Carol Burnett, it erased her entire lifetime of struggle. Lawyers advised her not to sue. Friends said she would lose. All of Hollywood shook its head and said no one beats a tabloid and wins. Carol Burnett stood tall and said, "I am not doing this for money. I am doing this because truth still has value." She sued. She won. In a historic ruling that shook American journalism, Carol Burnett proved that a person's honor is not something others can casually smear. And more importantly than anything else, she proved that sometimes standing alone to protect the truth is the bravest thing a human being can do. There are battles where, no matter how strong you are and no matter how right you are, you can still lose. This was that battle. Carol's eldest daughter, Carrie Hamilton, was a bright and talented girl. She loved her daughter more than anything in the world. But when Carrie was still a teenager, the familiar darkness began to appear. And this time, Carol realized that the enemy she had run from throughout her own childhood had found its way into her family in a different form. She could have chosen silence. She could have hidden it to protect the perfect image of a Hollywood star. Many famous parents had done exactly that. Carol Burnett did not. She did something no one in Hollywood at that time dared to do. She told the truth in public. She appeared in magazines not to promote a new film or show, but to admit to the entire country that her family was in crisis and that her daughter needed help. That was not the action of a star managing her image. That was the action of a desperate mother willing to risk everything to save her child. Tough love is a double-edged sword. It requires you to let your child face consequences while every day you wake up wondering if you are doing the right thing. It requires you to hurt so that the other person has a chance to grow. But it worked. Carrie Hamilton recovered. Mother and daughter became best friends, companions, two souls who had walked through hell together and returned. They wrote the play Hollywood Arms Together, turning their family's painful story into art. They turned wounds into pages. They turned survival into a legacy. For Carol, this was an achievement she was prouder of than any Emmy. Then, in 2001, the phone rang, and the story changed completely. Carrie Hamilton was diagnosed with lung cancer that had spread to her brain. Let us pause for a second to truly feel this. The woman who had beaten addiction, who had taken her life back from the darkness, who had turned pain into art with her mother, who was standing on the threshold of a brilliant life, now had to face an enemy that could not be negotiated with. And this time, no love, no matter how strong, was powerful enough to win. Carol sat by her daughter's hospital bed, day after day, week after week. The woman who had made all of America laugh now sat in silence, holding the hand of the child who was slowly leaving her. Before Carrie passed away at the age of 38 in 2002, she looked at her mother and whispered words that Carol would carry with her for the rest of her life. "I will not be gone forever. I will find a way to send you a sign. I will find a way to let you know I am okay." And then silence fell. The woman who had made millions laugh out loud now sat alone in deadly silence, holding her daughter's cold hand, and for the first time in her life, she could find no reason to smile. The curtain had fallen, and there was no applause. Not long after Carrie's passing, Carol was sitting in a restaurant. She was drowning in a wave of grief so deep that she felt as if she were sinking to the bottom of the ocean with no way to reach the shore. The pain of a mother who has lost her child is something no language can describe. It is unlike any other pain. It does not fade with time. It only changes shape. Then a stranger walked up to her table, without saying a word, without any explanation. The person placed a bouquet of flowers on the table and left. Those flowers were birds of paradise, Carrie's favorite. Carol looked at the bouquet and burst into tears. It could have been a random coincidence. Logic could explain it. The world is large and coincidences happen. But for someone in pain, for a heart searching for any sign that the person they love is still present somewhere, that moment needed no explanation. It only needed to be felt. It only needed to be believed. And Carol Burnett, the woman who had once fought alone in a courtroom, the woman who had stood firm against challenges that could knock anyone down, chose to believe it. Because sometimes faith is not a weakness. Sometimes it is the only thing that keeps a heart still beating. In 2020, when the whole world was shaking from the pandemic, Carol Burnett walked into a courtroom, not to receive an award, not to watch someone else be honored. She went there to ask for legal guardianship of her grandson Dylan. Her youngest daughter Erin was caught in the spiral of addiction, and history, with all its cruelty, was trying to repeat itself. A child was facing the risk of being left alone in the storm of adults, exactly like young Carol had stood in apartment 102 years earlier. And Carol Burnett, nearly 90 years old, with tired hands and hair turned white, made the decision that only someone who had once been saved by a grandmother could understand. She became nanny. 80 years earlier, in a dark apartment in Hollywood, an elderly woman had opened her arms and said, "I am here. I will not abandon you." Now, Carol Burnett herself stood before the court and repeated that exact gesture for her grandson. The circle had closed. Not the circle of tragedy and addiction, even though she could not erase that circle completely, but the circle of something far stronger. unconditional love, the love of a grandmother, the love brave enough to step into the middle of the storm and become the solid rock a child needs to stand on. And now we come to the part that all of you have been waiting for from the beginning of this video, the part that Carol Burnett finally admitted, the part that people had suspected for a long time but no one dared to ask directly. At the age of 92, sitting in a quiet room with cold awards on the shelf, Carol Burnett did not talk about enemies or Hollywood battles. She talked about regret. She said that even with everything, with fame and money and influence, she felt a deep emptiness that nothing could fill. And then she said this: she would trade everything, every Emmy, every Golden Globe, every shining moment of her legendary career, just to have 5 more minutes with Carrie. Just 5 minutes. When I first heard this, I had to stop, because this is the most honest sentence a Hollywood star has ever spoken. Not because it is tragic, although it is incredibly tragic, but because it reminds all of us of a truth we often forget in the busyness of everyday life. That no matter how many awards you have, how many achievements, how many legacies you leave behind, the most important thing will always be the person sitting beside you. Looking back at Carol Burnett's entire life, we see a child who grew up in poverty and trauma, learning to smile in order to survive. We see a young girl who received money from a stranger and kept her promise for half a century, because for her, integrity is not something you put on when convenient and take off when you no longer need it. We see a woman who dared to bet on herself when everyone else said she would fail. We see a mother who dared to speak the truth about her family's pain when staying silent would have been so much easier. We see a grandmother, at nearly 90 years old, stepping into a courtroom to save her grandson the way Nanny once saved her. And we see a woman sitting in the twilight of her life, admitting that all the spotlight in the world could not fill the emptiness left by the daughter she loved. Carol Burnett's story is not the story of a star. This is the story of all of us, people who try to love in a world that does not always answer love with happy endings. People who try to be strong for their families while inside they are silently breaking. People who learn to smile not because life is easy, but because laughter is the only way to keep moving forward. The next time you feel the weight of life pressing down on your shoulders, remember that woman, the woman who grew up in the darkness of apartment 102, learning to smile before she learned to cry. The woman who fought for the truth when no one believed she could win. The woman who lost the child she loved more than all the fame in the world. And that woman, at the age of 92, is still standing, still loving, still fighting for her. Every time Carol Burnett tugs her left earlobe on television, she is not just sending love to Nanny, she is sending a message to all of us. That message is, no matter how dark the night becomes, no matter how many times your heart has been broken, as long as you still have love and a reason to continue, you will never truly be alone. Thank you for taking the time to listen to this story. If Carol Burnett's story has touched your heart in any way, please share this video with the people you love, because sometimes the right story at the right time can change everything. See you in the next episode.